Hello, friends. We are going to talk about Anchor Project number 4 today, which is the last one before our portfolio. Woohoo! So let me present and then click the present button again. And here we are. So for this very last one, you're going to design your ideal school. Not too in detail because, like, if you actually had to calculate the budget for hiring the correct amount of teachers, you'd probably be overwhelmed and want to cry, and I don't want that out of it. So we're really just looking at big picture idealistic values. So the purpose of this assignment is to put yourself in the shoes of an administrator and create a portfolio for a school, if you will, that would demonstrate what your vision for inclusion would look like. So at this point in the class, you should be able to consider what a school needs to do to be welcoming of students from all varieties of experiences. The format on this is flexible. You can write it like a paper. You can do it as a presentation. As long as it has all the sections, I am indeed a happy woman. So feel free to present it in whatever method feels best to you. And I've tried to include, like, where necessary, like about how much writing you should do. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at your school's mission statement, just like you looked at your personal school's mission statement. Remember, we are creating our ideal school here. So if you were creating your very own school that you would be in charge of, what would your mission statement be? So you're looking for like 2 to 4 sentences. And somewhere in those 2 to 4 sentences, I do need to see your values of basically being welcoming to all students. Obviously, that's not going to be the only thing you have in your mission statement, because, like, if I were like, this school will welcome everybody. Okay, is it going to educate people too? So make sure it's like an actual mission statement, but do make sure that that inclusivity element is in there. The next thing I want you to do is describe the community your school serves. You can either pick a real community or you can fabricate one and make it up. I'm good either way, but you should include demographic data, cultural linguistic makeup, socioeconomic context, any existing resources and challenges. So you can either do a survey of your own personal community if you want to use real data, or you just completely can make this up to you. I just need to know what in your mind, where is the school situated at? And then you can identify 3 specific challenges your community faces based on the data you provide and explain why your community needs your vision for the school. So if you're thinking to yourself, but I made the data up. Mhm. And that's the point, right? So if I have, for example, if I put in my made up school data that 30% of my students are English language learners, then I'm going to know that a specific challenge my community faces is perhaps limited English proficiency among the parents. What am I going to do to solve that? Well, my vision shows that we're like involving the whole community by making, you know what I mean, and go on from there. So you can obviously use real data if you don't want to feel imaginative. That's probably what I would do if I were doing it, just because I'm not particularly that creative of a person. But if you would just rather make up the data yourself, you can do that too. We're looking more at like how you plan things related to challenges, but you also need some data to work with if you're going to have those challenges, which again, if the data is fabricated, is perfectly fine, because the idea is, can you consider how this thing in the data would relate to how you're going to fix it? Section number 2 is going to be your policies that protect students. So remember, these are for the imaginary school you're designing, not a real school. So you don't have to research these anywhere. You're creating them yourself. So what's your school's clear process for mandated reporting? Use the stuff you learned in training, right? How did your school proactively address racial disparities? How does your school support students with regards to gender equality? And then how does your school go beyond the bare minimum for compliance for differently abled students? So basically what I mean by that. So for each of the policies, I want you to state clearly what will or won't happen at your school. Reference any legal requirements that are relevant to what you wrote on the previous page. So like the sample or the example on mandated training that you'll do, for example, in Illinois, you were mandated reporters. So that is legal requirement, right? You're going to explain your why. How does your policy go beyond basic minimum compliance, right? Obviously, I want to treat everyone fair. Well, I would certainly hope so, right? But that's the bare minimum that you can do. So I want to see how you're taking proactive, not reactive approaches to kind of building up that community culture. And then kind of describe what's your plan for monitoring, assessing if the process is working. And obviously, this is all hypothetical because it is you creating this. Section number 3 is going to be your learning environment. So you're going to kind of expand what you did on a last project to kind of consider, like, what does your building layout communicate to students? And you do not have to draw a floor plan for a building, guys, so don't think that you do. But you could tell me, like, in the hallways, we have posters that whatever, right? So tell me what the building layout communicates to students. Like, for example, a building that had 3 floors, all stairs, and no elevators sends a very clear message to anybody who might have mobility issues, right? So you want to make sure that your building layout communicates that everyone's welcome. Where welcoming spaces at, where private spaces, collaborative spaces, do you have areas set aside for those different emotional needs? How does your physical environment reflect your mission? What does your school do to specifically support students experiencing housing instability? And then if you want to include a floor plan, you can, or you can just describe your key areas. Either one is fine. You don't have to have an annotated floor plan for this one. I just want to make sure you kind of address these things, right? And again, like I said, this is your dream school. You don't have to actually describe what the school you attended did. This is the school that you are creating in your mind. Daily practices and rituals, what happens every day that builds the culture you want? How do students experience safety, belonging, and know that there's high expectations for them? And then what's different about your school compared to maybe like what school did whenever you were a kid? Classroom railroad practices. So basically pull those in from previous assignments. How do you take the things that you do to make kids feel welcome in your classroom and scale them up to a school-wide scale? Section 4 requires you to zoom out quite a bit and look at a global perspective. So you're going to pick one country whose education system is doing something innovative related to equity and inclusion. I highly recommend using the discussion board on this to help. Okay. So when you did the discussion board post where you looked at something innovative that another country is doing with regards to equity and inclusion, you don't necessarily have to write about the one that you posted about on your discussion board, right? You can write about someone else's that you thought was interesting. Do whatever works there for you. Okay. So, and if yours was really, really cool and you want to write about that, cool beans, bud, go ahead and do that too. But you don't necessarily have to write about the one you did on the discussion board, but use it to your benefit, right? It's like a nice little repository of what everyone has found. So you're going to research, explain, what does this country do differently? Why does it work for their context, and what evidence exists for its effectiveness, right? Like, for example, here would be an example of what not to do, right? Pakistan has now basically banned girls from going to school. Okay, that's different than America. Why does it work for their context? Well, because they're currently being run by, a very militant religious group that doesn't believe that women should have the same rights because they're basically only supposed to stay at home. What evidence exists for its effectiveness? Literally nothing, right? They're an example of what not to do. And that's not, again, me being hateful towards Pakistan. They just previously actually had rights for women, and then they kind of scrapped all that. I just said Pakistan. I'm pretty sure I've got the country wrong. I'm so sorry. I meant Afghanistan. Totally wrong country. My bad. Wipe Pakistan out of your mind. I meant Afghanistan. I am losing my mind. Long day. And then your adaptation plan. So what's one specific practice from this country you'd adapt for your school? What would you keep exactly as the country does it? What would you modify for your context and why? And would you anticipate any challenges in implementation? And again, you don't want to do what Afghanistan, not Pakistan. I'm so sorry. You don't want to do what they are doing, so pick a country that you would actually want to imitate. We don't want to imitate what they're doing. They were an example of what not to do. So section 5, again, is your personal reflection and your portfolio connection. So these are the questions you're going to kind of answer in terms of personal reflection, because all of these specifically are related to particular standards that are on your portfolio that you'll have to answer. So, and I'm telling you this because when you go to do your portfolios at the end of class, you're going to be able to connect some of the stuff that you do here to these particular standards, right? Like, I'm trying to help you here. So you're looking for biases and assumptions you confronted while designing the school. Did you push yourself beyond your comfort zone? Give examples. Other things addressed in the reflection. How does your school design specifically respond to experiences students bring, whether that's language, culture, family, etc.? What evidence from the course informed those choices? Or basically, what have you learned that kind of made you decide to do that? And that's not like saying like, oh, I watched lesson 5. That's like, I read an article about this, right? 7B and 7C are basically communication and culture. What did you learn about how culture and gender differences can affect communication? How does your school design reflect this? And then the last thing you're going to do in the reflection section is I want you to look back at your anchor project number 1. Okay. So that was like your first classroom audit. And I don't know why it says week 1. It should say your anchor project number 1. What's changed in your thinking? What stayed the same? Has anything changed? Why or why not? So things I'll be looking for as I grade them: comprehensiveness and integration. Are all of your required elements present? Are you synthesizing information from previous units? Because you're drawing on what you've already done, right? That's the whole idea here. Specificity and personality. Is it yours? Does it sound like you? Is it an actionable plan? Awesome. Research. Are your claims cited and evidence-based? Because we don't want to do something just for the vibes. We want to do it because it's based on research. In organization, however you choose to do this, whether you give me a slideshow that you recorded yourself doing, whether you have written it as a paper, is it organized and clearly presented? As always, I want to hear your questions. So reach out to me with your questions so that I can answer your questions. Um, yeah, like I said, sorry that I got Pakistan and Afghanistan confused for a second. In my defense, I have two very small children at home and I don't sleep very well these days. Um, don't know how I got those two countries wrong. Really, really sorry about that. But again, I don't have video editing software, so you're getting it live, just like you'd see me for real. All right, friends, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So, and I'm also looking forward to seeing your stuff when you're done. All righty. See you soon.